It's so fun. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Purple Coach Conversations with Tanya and myself, Anne. Purple Coach Conversations was created to have a platform where we can have honest, open dialogue around diversity, inclusion, and equality. Now, Tanya and myself are not diversity experts, but we are both coaches, mothers, and entrepreneurs with a passion for equality in society. Today, we're joined by Wayne Trevor, and I'm going to let Tanya introduce him in a bit more detail. But thank you as well, Wayne, for being part of the Purple Coach Conversation platform.
Yes, thank you, Wayne, and welcome. Let me introduce you briefly before letting you go into more details about your journey. So, Wayne Trevor is a life coach for gay men. And to us, this topic is very dear. We've never had somebody talk about this before over the last 2.5, almost 3 years that Purple Coach Conversation started. Wayne works part-time in the public sector and has worked for many, many years there, and he's going to share all about his journey in starting in the transport underground as well and charity sector. So over to you, Wayne. We'd love to hear from you and your story.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya, and hi, Anne. Good to be with you today. And yeah, maybe I'll start with my journey where my professional journey started, which was, as you said, there working for London Underground, which is the metro system here in London. And yeah, I joined there in 2001, which seems like a lifetime ago now, straight out of university. And I joined because it was something which wasn't working very well. If for any of you that were in London in the late 90s or early 2000s, it was, always in the newspaper as being signal delays and problems, and it had, decades of underinvestment and all that sort of stuff. And I joined because I wanted to be part of understanding the solution and being part of that helping to fix that. So that was what originally drew me in. And then I suppose the reason why I stayed for such a long time, I spent 16 years working at the underground in a variety of different roles, was that London won the right to host the Olympics and Paralympic Games in 2012, and we found out in 2007, which gives us sort of like 5 years to get everything in order. And lots of people didn't think the transport system could be ready for 2012. And particularly the biggest criticism was that it wouldn't be ready to host a huge number of people coming for the Paralympics. So disabled people, people with different abilities. And there was a lot of people in London that was like, this transport system isn't fit. It's not fit for the 21st century. It's not fit for, both of you said to your mothers, you'll probably have your own experience of what it might be like to take a pushchair on the underground system. It's scary, it's difficult. There aren't lifts, there are lots of stairs. All of that stuff was part of the challenge that we had. And that was sort of my foray into the world of disability, equality and inclusion. So a lot of our focus was on physical disability, as in physical access to the system, but recognizing that it's not just the physical challenges that were a problem. It was the attitudes of staff, the way that they could be really enabling and helping people, say a visually impaired person, to get from from outside the station onto a train and out again, and how it can be perceived as well for sort of safety if you were a disabled person, safety if you were maybe a woman on your own late at night, and how you might experience that. And so that was my journey really into the world of disability, equality, and inclusion. And then, of course, I got my own experiences as a gay man as well, working in a large public sector organisation. What it was maybe to feel unsafe, also traveling on the tube system. If you Saturdays and there might be lots of football people going to watch football and having a few beers and that kind of stuff, and how I might have felt traveling at that sort of time. And so that was my first first professional work, working with lots of people, understanding their perceptions, and then working within an organization to make those changes. And that's where it all started for me.
It sounds really fascinating, Wayne. A lot of what you're saying there, especially, just looking at your work with the London Underground, and for those who are not familiar with it, you can imagine an underground system like in New York or anywhere else. But you talk about safety in three areas that really stuck out to me. I moved to the UK in 2002, and I can really resonate with some of the issues that you're talking about. safety for women when you're traveling. And I remember being attacked by a group of guys, and people just kind of like, it was me and another girl, and were hurling insults, threatening to spit in our faces, and people just kind of walked past by. And after that, like, I think, your work is so important, because I know that there's loads of other people as well who have felt not particularly safe in the underground, especially in the past. It's a very different experience for me now. And I can really, really appreciate the work that has been done there. Talking about the accessibility for disabled people. And I have friends who are on wheelchairs, and you hear how they, in the past, needed to move from point A to point B. And it was just like, oh my goodness, you don't realize this person has to take 2 extra hours
Yeah.
in the, back then. And it's such a big difference now. So, I applaud you for the safety and the accessibility that has been such a key factor. As a mother as well, I've done the whole pushchair thing up and down the stairs, and you find people. But I think these are things that, if people don't actually experience them themselves, can be really hard to even notice, let alone appreciate. What is it that got you into that? Like, from a personal perspective, what is it that drew you to the London Underground system in particular?
Yeah, so I remember seeing, the news articles almost daily, with the local newspaper here in London around the delays, the problems, that was through lack of investment. And so I've always been working in the change industry, if you like. And so back in the day with the Underground, it was working on the change of a system, a very physical system that's there to move people fundamentally. And now I suppose I'm focusing on the change that people go through, and the personal transformation that happens. And I've always been interested in looking for the solutions of things as well, acknowledging that there's something that doesn't work in the way that it could do, or that meets the needs of the people that need it. And then saying, okay, great, this is how it is. How could it be? What does that look like? And the work that we did back in the 2000s there, and the run up to the Olympics, was very much about not just me deciding, or some people in an office deciding the changes that need to be made. It was really important to have those experiences of people themselves. So we got panels of disabled people, we got panels of staff user groups, we got panels of women and other user groups in to decide and to help us shape what that work looked like. To help us interpret what, in some cases, was fairly new legislation. It's not just using the legislation as a tool to make change, or that can be really useful. But the legislation changes from the Equality Act. It was called something else back then, and various other legislation that applied to the railway. It was the first time we were using that legislation to make changes to trains and to stations. And it's kind of like, how do we get this right? Well, the best way is to have the wheelchair users, and to have people with partial sight, and to have mums and fathers with pushchairs to say, this doesn't really work for me. If you put that button there, I won't be able to touch it. Or if you put this seat here, it's really difficult to navigate with the whatever. And so it was a really exciting time to be able to kind of work and bring all of that together with the engineers and with the people the finance people who hold the purse strings as to how we were going to make those changes. And so it was a very exciting time to be able to be part of that decision making.
That was very interesting, Wayne, and especially understanding as well for everyone that when we want to be part of the Olympics or Paralympics, it's not just about winning the sport, but it's about all these changes that happen on the side. The fact that it's a massive catalyst for progress for the city to encourage people to do those changes that may not have been done without it. And I'm wondering, if you, and I know it's a coaching question, but if you were to rate, where we were in 2007 versus today, and where you think we should be in the next 5 years, and what are the next steps for progress? Because, I don't think everybody has only positive things to say about the London Underground. I mean, the strikes is out of your control, of course, but I'm talking about other things, and because there's still signal issues, delays, and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering, for people who may struggle sometimes to get to one place or another, what are the other things that that you guys are working on for, to make things easier for people with motor issues or babies or other things, or security, etc.?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I haven't worked at the Underground now for probably about 6 or 7 years. So now that's why I'm into the, in the industry of helping people directly in the life coaching, which is what I worked on. But maybe just as a comment on that, the improvements we made from 2007 to 2012 were massive. It was a period of huge change, and some of those changes continued on in terms of the physical accessibility. I think one of the things that a lot of people recognized during the Olympics was how the perception of the Paralympics and the Olympics were almost on a parallel. It was seen as equivalent sports. It was human beings taking part in sporting endeavor. Whereas in previous Olympics, even back as into Beijing was the one before 2012, the Olympics was seen as the main show, and the Paralympics was seen as the thing that comes after it. And in London, that changed. And I really remember disabled people and and non-disabled people really saying that they got to enjoy all of it sort of equally. There were certain highlights. I remember Ellie Simmons, doing the swimming, and Oscar Pistorius took place in the Olympics and the Paralympics. And obviously, what came after that was really awful. But there was a certain moment there that where there was a crossover between Olympics and Paralympics too. And there's always more to do. Like you'd probably want to speak to disabled people and ask for their opinion as to what they think the system is like. There's always more to do. There's still lots of the system that's inaccessible, but it has moved on a huge amount in the last the last 10 years. So yeah, more to do, but lots of improvements have come forwards.
Brilliant. Wayne, after you left London Transport, you went on to work for the charity sector. And I'd love to hear more about how you worked with excluded groups. I know there was some aspect of working with people in trauma and different childhood experiences. Please share with us a little bit more about that and how your passion for creating a society that includes people from marginalized or excluded groups comes into play into that role.
Yeah, so I think my experience of working in the transport sector had led me to always working in a place of change, and that's an area that I really enjoy working in, and that increasingly had been working change at a people level rather than perhaps a physical system level. And yeah, so I went to work in the charity sector for in an area which is seen as it's at the wrong end of the scale on lots of the socioeconomic factors that you might look at. So it's an area which has high degrees of poverty. It's an area that's really been left behind over the last 20 or 30 years. It's an area which has had lots of churn and change in terms of people and where people have come from, and lack of opportunity and all of those sorts of things. And so working in the charity sector there really gave me an opportunity to carry on that work, to continue to work with people who lots of us want the very same things from life. We want to be able to connect with other people. We want to have a family life. We want to be able to do meaningful work, to feel safe, those sorts of things. They're quite universal, and in many cases people don't get the opportunity to do that. And so so I went to work in the charity sector there, which was helping to set up a charity to support people in that way. But the thread, I think, through all of that's always been people, and supporting people and helping people to achieve the sort of things that they want to achieve in life.
Creating that community, we can tell, is so important to you. And when we check your social media, and we'll put all the links in the show notes, of course, you talk a lot about head fitness. For gay men. Of course, it's for everybody, but your niche, if I'm not mistaken, is the gay community. So I would like to kind of ask you about this and the challenges around that particular work that you do, and how you're helping them.
Yeah, this idea of mental fitness. So it can be a bit of a continuum with mental health, but mental health, I think, sometimes has a bit of a connotation of a deficit. You know, there's a problem. We've got poor mental health, or you know, I have a mental health problem is often how that can be perceived. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think sometimes it can be a barrier to people talking about the practices we might have to keep us well every day, you know, to preventative. So the often example I might give is, you know, people don't go for a run or a walk, or they don't go to the gym because they're in poor physical health. They go because they want to maintain good health, and so they can, you know, be preventative in that way. And so I think for me, it's really important we have a conversation about that preventative mental fitness, so we can be in a really good shape mentally. And so, yeah, from my perspective, you know, the gay community, and I speak about the gay men community because it's the one that I'm a member of, so I can talk about that with, you know, on good authority. We experience from a young age a lot of we experience that in you know, growing up and that sort of stuff in many ways that often don't support us and don't help us to thrive. You know, so most people have their experiences, but we can start to grow up as teenagers, experiencing our sexuality. It's often experienced in a way that is seen as not okay, or it can be a bit shameful, or it can be something that we might learn to hide because we're not accepted. Because, and from my experience, you know, I'm in my early 40s now, so certainly when I was growing up in the 90s, it was not seen as something that was accepted by society. Lots of families wouldn't have known how to deal with you know, supporting a gay kid or anything like that. So we learn to hide it, you know, and we learn to not be ourselves, and we learn to kind of split off from that. And that can be really damaging later on in life. You know, we learn to hide, we learn to keep secrets. Some gay men might turn to sort of behaviors that don't support their mental health and mental well-being. So that might relate, you know, end up in addictions. That might be using substances or processes that help us to sort of, you know, to feel better about ourselves. But fundamentally, it's all a bit of a denial of self. It's all about not feeling good enough. We might overwork, which is something I did in my case, you know, and it led to burnout in the, you know, in one instance where I had time off work because the behaviors that I was, you know, sort of chasing this idea that if I could be an amazing employee, doing amazing things, saving the world, you know, that kind of approach, somehow I'd feel better about myself. And of course, fundamentally, that kind of work is an inside job. So yeah, so the work that I do now in the life coaching world, so with HeadFit, which is the space for gay men, is about providing this kind of the support space to be able to come together and share those experiences, or the experiences that we're going on and experiencing in the day. I have a 6-week intensive program which people can go on, which is about looking at the things that are holding us back, providing the tools and the skills to improve the things that can really support us in making a difference. And then, you know, the one-to-one coaching that goes alongside that to help people lead lives which are happy, which are authentic, which have great relationships, great work, you know, whatever people are looking for, whichever the bits of their lives aren't quite working well. So yeah, that's been my journey to supporting people in that community.
That's really fascinating, Wayne. And you've said quite a few things that was almost kind of really leading into the next point that I had. And, you know, as coaches, the three of us are all coaches, and we know that a lot of the times we're drawn into coaching a particular group of people based on our own experiences, and where we feel like, you know, I can step into this person's shoe and really understand who they are, their experiences, the transformation they want, they need. And also, you just kind of get into your zone of genius easier because you're experiencing it. So it makes a lot of sense that your work is centered around working with gay men. Um, you also touched a couple of things there, which, you know, really highlights as well that what we are trying to do with Purple Coach Conversations is have this conversation that people's experiences are different from different groups and so on. And how you have come to do what you do as a coach. You talk about mental health in the gay community and why it looks different perhaps than in other communities. And I think that's really something important to highlight, the whole concept of acceptance, whether it's acceptance from society or acceptance of yourself as well. So looking at that, would you like to share your experience of coming out and coming to the acceptance of yourself?
Yeah, wow, that's a powerful ask, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, like I grew up in the Midlands in the, in the 80s and 90s. That's the middle of the country. It's for those people who don't know it, there were industrial towns. They were full of, blue collar workers from the mines and the steelworks and that kind of stuff. And so, and they experienced a lot of deindustrialization, a lot of businesses closing, when I was a kid, people going out of work and that sort of stuff. So, and I say that just by way of, that was a large part of the country, and that was the context in which I grew up in a place that was increasingly being increasingly poor, challenges, that sort of stuff. And and I started to become aware of being different. That's, I think, how a lot of people would describe it. Probably my early teens, and just having this experience of almost sheer horror, just having absolutely no idea of what it was, but knowing it was different, I felt different. It felt like I felt different from other boys. There was nobody to talk to. In the UK at that time, there was actual legislation in place that stopped schools from being able to talk about those kind of issues, about gay issues. It was called Section 28, and that didn't get repealed until the early 2000s. So, so there was just nowhere that could go. And unless you knew somebody or there was a connection, there was no internet. So these days, if you're a teenager and you start to kind of experience that, you could use the internet. The only stuff we ever saw on TV or on radio was often in derogatory terms. It wasn't seen as a part of society and stuff. So all of those messages sort of lead to this suggestion of whatever it is I'm feeling is not okay. And should be kept secret and kept silent and stuff. And so that was my experience. It wasn't until I came to London to study as I was 19 that I was really in a position to kind of explore that by, joining the LGBT group at university, starting to realize, hey, it's not shameful. There is people out there is a support group, and start to kind of find those friends and connections and those sorts of things. I didn't really come out to my family until I was, close to being 21, and that just having to disclose who you are to the people that love you the most, is an aspect that a lot of people perhaps don't ever have to go through. It's maybe you do if there's certain something going on in your life, but most people never have to sort of come to a point where they're like, oh, by the way, this is what's going on. And then there can be that sort of aspect as well that, do you disclose that when you go into a place of work? Is it safe to go into a place of work? I feel now that the world and society has moved on so much more that for the most part, it feels okay to go in a place of work and to be who I am. But in the early years of my career, you think to yourself, will this hold me back? Will there be somebody who doesn't like me? What does that look like? Even having those conversations, like I've never followed football or rugby or whatever, but a classic conversation in an environment with other men is like, what team do you support? And immediately, my experience would just be to go into this shame of like, I don't know about this world. I don't care about this world. Can I talk about something else? Can I talk about the fact I like technology or this or that? And so you're constantly experiencing that all the time and explaining or feeling like you need to explain yourself. And it's a real journey over time. It's a journey over time to recognize that who I am is okay. I don't need to explain myself to anybody. But because it's such a core and such a thing that we experience, or I experience at an early age, that can take a really long time to uncover, and for me, what I needed was I had some therapeutic work, I needed that therapy to kind of look at the things that went on in the past, to understand them. And that's not everybody's journey. Some people just have their experience and they move on, but that was what I needed to be able to kind of move through that. And yeah, I sit here now today and I can talk about this with you, people that I don't really know that well, and share my story and sort of talk about that and not have a shame attack and not feel panicked about sharing my truth. And just do that in a way of like, yeah, that's my experience, that's my journey. And I know quite a lot of people my age will have had some kind of experience of that as well.
Wayne, thanks for opening up and sharing your journey. Like you said, we are the same age, roughly all three of us. And one of my close friends with whom we did high school together, then went to university together, very similar. He was hiding or creating, fake crushes that he would have on women, etc. And just not saying and opening up. And And sometimes I was wondering, why wouldn't he feel safe enough to tell us, especially, I think with his friends, closest friends of his age, we would share even an apartment for like a couple of years, etc. It's only at the end of the university that he finally opened up. Now he's in a very serious relationship. He's very happy, etc. And when I asked him, he said that it was his dad, basically. Even though his dad is a very smart professor in business school, universities in France, etc., quite progressive, open-minded. His father had biases and would say certain things against, that were not positive against the gay community, and so he created that wall with his dad. And then one day, and he felt strong enough when he graduated from university and told him that he was gay. And now, I mean, he's totally accepted by his family and loved, etc. But it was the dad went through a whole journey himself, right? And felt quite ashamed of all the comments he said unintentionally from also his childhood and things that he heard from his dad. So yeah, and we can't really empathize with that, but we can just, I mean, it's more, we can empathize, but we haven't lived it ourselves. So it's very hard to really fully understand it. And that's what I wanted to ask you. That's my leading to this question, which is, we are parents now, and maybe in 10 years time, one of my children might say that they're gay. What, or not say anything, but I might have an intuition of it, because it can also be that they don't really understand themselves yet. What advice would you give to parents going through that, whether they feel okay about it or not? What is it that you can share from your experience and your coaching?
Yeah, I mean, I think the world, and certainly the conversations we're having now, and as coaches, the one thing that coaches train about, and for those of us that subscribe to like the ICF Code of Ethics, that's fundamental to treating the person you see in front of you as a human being. That's that they're whole, and they come with all of their sort of the sort of beautifulness of being a human being, right? And to see that for what it is. And also to recognize that we have our own biases, and to be really aware of those biases and not to sort of bring those into the picture. So I think that is an amazing start already, to the very fact that you said, I might see this. What are the things I might look for? What does that look like? I think that's already an incredible basis for just seeing the person, seeing the child for who they are, supporting them as much as possible with whatever it is that they're going through, whether that's something like what might become their sexuality, or whether it's like the fact that they prefer, I don't know, cats over dogs, or they prefer one particular kind of pursuit over another. It's kind of recognizing that and saying, that's fab, I support you with that, as opposed to, no, that's not something that my child should be doing, and that brings this sort of expectation, that shame, that kind of bias. So I think really being aware of that and being supportive around those things that come up is really important. And it's a journey, right? Because we will have expectations. You will have expectations as parents. There'll be certain things that the family might have done for generations that it's like, oh, my child doesn't like this. Why not? We've had this. This is a way to share. But, it's recognizing when those things are harmful and might be, setting into place practices or suggestions that might be detrimental. I think as well as a society now, we are much more aware of treating people as individuals and as humans, and seeing that quality. Now, don't get me wrong, there is huge amount of work to do. There is still, the polarization and the microaggressions, and in some cases it can seem like the world is increasingly unsafe in certain aspects. But I think we're more aware of the sort of the landscape there, and when we're able to see those and to speak up. So I think, if you're bringing a sense of open-mindedness, certainly a sense of love, and sort of respect, I think they are incredible, starting points. Building that sense of trust and safety for anybody, whether that's a child or another human being in your space, I think can be really helpful. And then when it gets to a point of recognizing there is something going on here, we've had a conversation, I don't know how to help, asking that person. The child won't always know, but another adult might. And then you can be seeking some additional support. There'll be people out there, it might be a friend that you've said, oh, my friend's got some experience, or it can be a professional group, or it can be a professional. And we know as coaches where we're able to help and where we can't, and we need to support them to get other professional help. And there's a huge amount, we'll know this from a lot of different aspects as well, being an ally, whether that's an ally to women, because we know that a woman might feel unsafe if she's on her own in a walking down the road on her own, or an ally to a gay person who might be experiencing some distress or having something said, or an ally to a person of color who might be experiencing, we can be an ally. And I heard something the other day that said that allyship isn't just a concept, it's a verb, it's an action. It's something we can actually do to stand up for and to support those people who might be going through something which is detrimental to themselves. And so I think being a good ally is something else we can do too.
I think that's you've said so many powerful things there, Wayne, and I love the way Tanya was asking about the parents, and as a parent as well, I think it's something a lot of people would find it interesting. But then you brought it into this space where actually it can apply to anyone, right? Not just parents. Like if it's a friend, if it's a colleague, like if you don't know, have those conversations, which is why we created Prepper Coach Conversations. So I'm loving this. Sorry, I'm getting super excited. I'm just like, yes, we're getting to the mission. Let's have these conversations. And the fact that you, as well, you say, I think there's no more space for ignorance in this time and day. There really isn't. Like, if you don't know, reach out, ask the questions, do your research, ask IA, like there is no more space for any more ignorance. Thank you so much, Wayne, for everything that you've shared. I know Tanya will agree with me when I say that it's been such an inspirational conversation. And the work that you do is really impactful for a lot of people. Please do share with us if anyone wants to reach out to you to work with you. What's the best way to get in touch? And just to let everyone listening in as well, please check out the show notes. We will put in the links there as well. But if you can just mention that.
Yeah, sure. If you want to reach out directly via email, WayneTrevorCoaching@gmail.com is a really great place to connect with me. If you want to follow the work I'm doing on Instagram, you can follow @GayHeadFit, which is the work that I'm doing there with HeadFit for Gay Men. Yeah, I'll give you some other links as well that you can pop in the show notes, but they're probably the two main ways that you can connect with me.
All right, brilliant. Thank you so much, Wayne, once again, for joining us and being part of this platform. I really appreciate your time and everything that you've shared as well. Thank you as well to our dear listeners and our followers. Please check out Wayne's links on the show notes. Check out the past interviews that we've done as well. We hope you continue to find the platform inspirational. Do share it with others. And do reach out as well if there's a topic that you'd like us to cover, or if you'd like to be a part of the podcast or part of the series as well. Would love to hear from you. Thank you, everyone, once again. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Tanya. And take care for now. Bye.
Thanks.